At an exclusive private school, where the wealthiest families in the city sent their children, Nathan was just another entitled student. Coming from a rich and influential family, he enjoyed the perks of wealth and status, relishing in the admiration of his classmates. Nathan perfectly embodied the stereotype of a rich kid, confident, sometimes bordering on arrogance, and untouchable in the eyes of those around him. He never had to face the tough realities that others endured. Among the staff at the school was Maria, a quiet and hardworking woman who had taken a job as a cleaner to make ends meet. She had started working there not too long ago, and like many in her position, she remained largely invisible to the students who passed her by every day. Maria was no stranger to hardship, but she never spoke of her past. She carried the burden of her struggles silently, focusing on her work and keeping to herself. To Nathan, Maria was just another face in the background, someone he hardly noticed or thought about. The only time he acknowledged her existence was when he felt like making an offhand, rude remark. One day, while hurrying through the school's busy hallway, Nathan noticed Maria trying to juggle a pile of textbooks while cleaning at the same time. She stumbled, and a few of the books fell loudly onto the gleaming floor. The noise grabbed the attention of several students, including Nathan. With a smirk playing on his lips, Nathan approached her. His tone was filled with sarcasm as he said, "Nice going, Maria. Maybe you should learn how to balance things better. You know, people like you can't afford to make mistakes here." A few of his friends chuckled in the background, amused by the humiliation. Maria's face turned red with embarrassment, but she didn't respond. She bent down to pick up the fallen books, her hands shaking slightly as she tried to gather them. Sensing an opportunity to assert his superiority, Nathan continued, "You should probably stick to mopping floors. That seems like the only thing you're actually good at." His classmates laughed, adding to the cruel atmosphere, while Maria kept her gaze fixed on the ground, biting her lip to keep from saying anything. She quietly gathered the books and resumed her work, not uttering a word in response. For Nathan, it was just another instance of flexing his power, something he didn't give a second thought to. But for Maria, it was yet another painful reminder of the vast gap between them, not just in terms of wealth, but in how people viewed her. Nathan quickly forgot about the incident, as he did with anything that didn't directly impact his life. To him, Maria was just another insignificant member of the school staff, someone who barely registered in his world. But then, an event occurred that would forever change Nathan's perspective. One afternoon, as the school day came to an end and students began to file out of the building, Nathan noticed something unusual. Instead of the family driver or a member of the household staff picking him up, his father had arrived in person. It was a rare occurrence. His father was usually far too busy with work to do something like this. Curious, Nathan made his way toward the school gates where his father stood, waiting by the car. However, something unexpected caught Nathan's eye. As he approached, he saw Maria working nearby. She suddenly froze in place, staring at his father as if she had just seen a ghost. Nathan glanced between the two of them, confusion bubbling up inside him. Why was Maria looking at his father like that? There was a flicker of recognition on her face, but she looked stunned, almost terrified. Nathan's father had noticed Maria as well. For a split second, there was disbelief written across his face, but it quickly shifted to something deeper, an expression of shock, followed by what appeared to be sorrow. Slowly, he began walking toward her, taking tentative steps, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Maria? Is that really you?" Nathan was caught off guard by the tension in the air. He stood between them, bewildered by what was happening. "Wait, you know her?" he asked, his voice laced with confusion. But his father didn't respond immediately. He seemed frozen, his eyes locked on Maria, who looked equally shaken. Finally, Maria nodded, her voice trembling as she spoke. "I didn't know. I didn't realize. It's been so long." Nathan's father took another step forward, his face filled with a mix of emotions. "I've been searching for you for years," he said softly. "I promised your father I would take care of you, but then you disappeared. I tried everything to find you. It felt like time had come to a standstill." Nathan, still reeling from this shocking revelation, struggled to make sense of the situation. He glanced back and forth between his father and Maria, trying to process what was happening. His father's words echoed in his head, but they made no sense. How did his father know Maria? And why was he speaking as if she was someone important? Maria, now visibly emotional, stood there silently, her eyes filled with a mix of recognition and pain. Nathan couldn't shake the strange feeling that something monumental had just been revealed, but he didn't yet understand what it all meant. As Nathan stood there, his father's words echoed in his mind. Why was his father talking as if Maria was someone important, someone more than just a cleaner? The pieces started falling into place as his father began sharing a story, one Nathan had never heard before. Years ago, his father had been business partners with a man named Michael Thompson, a brilliant entrepreneur who had played a crucial role in building the family's fortune. The two men had been inseparable, working tirelessly side by side to create the empire that Nathan's family now enjoyed. But then, tragedy struck. Michael had died in a sudden accident, leaving behind a daughter, Maria. In his final moments, Michael had asked Nathan's father to promise he would look after Maria and ensure she was cared for. Nathan's father had made that promise, but after Michael's death, Maria disappeared. She left home without telling anyone, unaware of the fortune her father had amassed. Michael had planned to surprise her with a new life, but she had no idea that her father had left her a significant inheritance. In the chaos following his death, Maria found herself struggling to survive on her own, never knowing what was waiting for her. "I searched for you," Nathan's father said, his voice thick with emotion. "I looked everywhere, but I couldn't find you. All I had was one old photo, but when I saw you today, I knew it was you. I never gave up hope, but I feared the worst. And now, here you are, working at this school. I can hardly believe it." Nathan stood frozen in place, his mind racing. The girl he had mocked, belittled, and insulted, she wasn't just a cleaning attendant. She was the daughter of his father's closest friend, and more than that, she was supposed to inherit a fortune that Nathan had always assumed was his. His world had been turned upside down in a matter of moments. Maria's voice trembled as she spoke, her emotions clearly visible. "I didn't know," she said, her words soft and filled with regret. "I didn't know what happened to my father. I thought he had nothing left. I had no idea he had become successful. I didn't know you were looking for me." Nathan's father shook his head, regret written all over his face. "I failed you, Maria," he said. "I should have found you sooner, but now that you're here, we can make things right." The weight of the situation hit Nathan like a ton of bricks. He had spent so much time treating Maria as if she were beneath him, mocking her for her position, all while she was the rightful heir to a fortune. His arrogance, his cruelty, it all came rushing back to him, but now with the harsh light of reality. This wasn't just about money. This was about who she really was and what she deserved. Nathan's father turned to him, his expression serious. "Nathan," he began, his voice quiet but firm, "Maria is entitled to a significant portion of the wealth we've built. It's what her father wanted for her. She is just as much a part of this family's legacy as you are." Nathan felt his stomach twist with guilt and shame. He had lived his life believing he was better than others because of his wealth and status, but now the truth was undeniable. Maria wasn't just a maid. She was someone who deserved the life he had always taken for granted, and now she was about to inherit a fortune even greater than he had ever imagined. But what happened next left Nathan speechless. Maria, despite all the revelations and the way Nathan had treated her, didn't respond with anger or demands for revenge. She didn't seek retribution for the cruel words he had thrown at her. Instead, she looked at him with kindness in her eyes, a soft understanding that Nathan couldn't comprehend. "I know why you treated me the way you did," Maria said gently. "You didn't know who I was, and you didn't know my story, but now you do. I hope this will teach you that people are more than what they seem on the surface." Nathan stood there, overwhelmed by the guilt he felt. He couldn't find the words to apologize. All he could do was nod, humbled by the grace Maria had shown him. "I've learned a lot from my experiences," Maria continued, her voice calm, yet filled with wisdom. "Life has a way of teaching us things we never expect. But the most important lesson I've learned is that everyone deserves to be treated with respect, no matter where they come from or what they look like. Wealth doesn't make anyone better than someone else. Her words pierced Nathan's heart. He had spent so long living in a bubble of privilege, believing that his wealth made him superior to others. But now, standing in front of Maria, he realized just how wrong he had been. She had every reason to be angry with him, to demand more from him, but instead, she showed him the value of kindness and humility. Nathan's father, too, was deeply moved by Maria's words. He stepped closer to her and gently placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice filled with gratitude. "You've shown us all something important today, Maria," he said softly. For the first time in his life, Nathan felt truly humbled. His world had been shattered and rebuilt in a single afternoon. Maria's forgiveness and wisdom had shaken him to his core, and he knew that he would never be the same person again. As they stood together in the fading light of the afternoon, Nathan realized that this was more than just a story about wealth and inheritance. It was a lesson about the human heart, about how people should treat one another regardless of their circumstances. And it was a lesson he would carry with him for the rest of his life. Today, Maria, you've reminded us all of the value of kindness, empathy, and understanding. From that day forward, Maria became more than just an employee at the school. She became part of Nathan's family. A family she had been separated from for so long. Nathan, deeply ashamed of his past behavior, made a conscious effort to change. He treated Maria with the respect she deserved, not because of her newfound wealth, but because he had finally learned the lesson she had so graciously taught him. And as for Maria, she embraced her new life with grace and humility, never forgetting where she came from or the struggles she had faced. She became a symbol of resilience and compassion, not just to Nathan, but to everyone who knew her. As the days passed, Nathan found himself haunted by his past behavior towards Maria. He couldn't escape the shame that came from realizing just how poorly he had treated her. What once seemed like harmless teasing now felt like venomous cruelty. He often replayed the moments in his head, the snide remarks, the haughty glances, and each memory added weight to the burden he now carried. Yet Maria, despite having every reason to hold a grudge, carried on with her usual grace. She remained kind, always polite, and never made Nathan feel lesser for what had transpired between them. It was this quiet dignity that left Nathan even more unsettled. She could have demanded retribution, could have reveled in her newfound position of power, but instead, she chose understanding. The contrast between her humility and his entitled behavior gnawed at him. One evening, as Nathan sat alone in his room, he made a decision. He had to talk to Maria, not just to apologize, though that was certainly long overdue, but to understand her better. It wasn't enough to just recognize his mistake. He needed to learn from it. He needed to confront his own ignorance. The next morning, Nathan approached Maria while she was tending to some plants in the school courtyard. She had taken up gardening as a way to clear her mind, and she looked peaceful as her fingers gently brushed the leaves of the plants. "Maria," Nathan's voice was hesitant, unsure. She looked up, surprised to see him. "Nathan," she acknowledged with a soft smile. "How are you?" Nathan scratched the back of his neck, feeling awkward. I wanted to talk to you. Do you have a moment?" Maria straightened up and nodded. "Of course." They walked over to a bench in the courtyard and sat in silence for a few moments. Nathan struggled to find the right words. This was harder than he had imagined. Finally, he spoke, his voice heavy with guilt. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened, about the way I treated you. And I want to say I'm sorry," Nathan began, his words shaky. "I was awful to you, and I had no right to say the things I said. I didn't know who you were, but that's no excuse. It doesn't matter who you are, no one deserves to be treated like that." Maria listened quietly, her eyes soft but serious. Nathan continued, the words spilling out faster now that he had started. "I've been living in this bubble my whole life. I never had to think about what it's like for someone who doesn't have what I have. I just assumed. I assumed things about you because of how you looked and the job you had, and that's so messed up. I don't even know how to begin making it right." Maria stayed silent for a moment, letting Nathan's apology hang in the air. Then she spoke, her voice calm and understanding. "I appreciate your apology, Nathan. It takes courage to admit when you're wrong. But more than that, it's important to understand why it happened in the first place. You're right, it shouldn't matter who I am or what my background is. We should treat everyone with respect, no matter their story." She paused for a moment, then continued, "But it's not just you. A lot of people make assumptions based on appearances. It's something I've dealt with my whole life." Nathan looked down at his hands, ashamed. "I never thought about it like that," he admitted. Maria smiled gently. "That's because you haven't had to. People like me, we're constantly aware of how the world sees us. It's something you learn to navigate, but it's not easy. And when people like you, people who have influence, power, choose to use that power to put others down, it has real consequences." Nathan's heart sank. "I never wanted to hurt anyone. I just didn't think." "I know," Maria said kindly, "but now you do, and that's what matters." Nathan felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. Her forgiveness, her grace, it was more than he could have hoped for. He had come to her expecting anger, maybe even resentment, but instead, she had shown him compassion. It was a lesson he would carry with him forever. "I want to do better," Nathan said, his voice quiet but sincere. "I want to understand, not just about you, but about people. I don't want to live in that bubble anymore." Maria nodded, her expression warm. "That's a good place to start, Nathan. We all have things to learn, and the fact that you're willing to try, that's what's important." As they sat there, surrounded by the soft rustle of the courtyard plants, Nathan felt a sense of peace he hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't just about righting the wrongs of the past, it was about becoming a better person moving forward. And in that moment, he knew that with Maria's guidance, he could. They stood up from the bench, and Nathan smiled, genuinely this time. "Thank you, Maria, for everything." Maria returned the smile, her eyes filled with understanding. "You're welcome, Nathan. We all have the ability to grow." And with that, Nathan walked away from the conversation feeling lighter, knowing that this was just the beginning of a new chapter in his life, one where he would strive to be the person Maria's kindness had inspired him to become. Maria wasn't just forgiving Nathan, she was offering him a chance to grow, to become a better person. It was a gift he hadn't expected, and it humbled him even more. As they talked, Nathan found himself opening up in ways he hadn't before. He spoke about the pressure to live up to his family's expectations, and how wealth had isolated him from understanding other people's struggles. Maria, in turn, shared more about her life, losing her father, and the pain of growing up not knowing where she truly belonged. The more they talked, the more Nathan realized how much they had in common, despite the vast differences in their lives. They had both been shaped by their circumstances. However, where Nathan had been shielded by privilege, Maria had been shaped by hardship. Over the next few weeks, Nathan made a conscious effort to change. He became more involved in the school's outreach programs, volunteering to help with initiatives that supported underprivileged students. He began to see the world through a different lens, one that wasn't tinted by wealth and status. Some of his friends noticed the change, and though a few teased him for it, Nathan didn't care. He was starting to understand what it meant to be part of something bigger than himself. Meanwhile, Maria had become more than just a worker at the school. She had been invited into Nathan's family, and though it was still a bit awkward for him at times, Nathan's father had taken her under his wing, treating her like the daughter he had once promised to protect. Maria had also begun to explore the opportunities her inheritance afforded her, but she did so with the same humility she had always shown. She didn't flaunt her wealth or use it to elevate herself above others. Instead, she used it to give back, supporting causes that were close to her heart. One evening, Nathan's father hosted a party at their estate to celebrate Maria's return to the family. It was a grand affair, with all the influential people in their circle invited. Nathan, who had never been fond of such gatherings, found himself standing on the sidelines, watching as Maria mingled with the guests. But what struck him most wasn't that she was now part of this world. It was the way she carried herself. Maria was gracious, warm, and welcoming to everyone she met, regardless of their status or wealth. She treated the staff with the same kindness she showed the guests, never once letting her newfound position change who she was. As Nathan observed her, he felt a deep sense of pride, not in himself, but in Maria. She had been through so much, yet she remained unshaken by the trappings of wealth and privilege. She was the person he aspired to be, someone who saw the value in others, no matter their circumstances. Later that night, after most of the guests had left, Nathan found Maria sitting by herself in the garden, gazing up at the stars. He quietly joined her, sitting beside her in silence. "You've come a long way," Maria said, breaking the stillness. "I can see the change in you." Nathan smiled, though there was still a trace of uncertainty in his eyes. "I'm trying, but I still have a lot to learn." Maria nodded. "We all do." They sat together in comfortable silence, both reflecting on the journey they had been on. Finally, Nathan spoke again. "Maria, I just want to say thank you. Not just for forgiving me, but for teaching me. You've changed the way I see the world." Maria turned to him, her expression soft. "You've changed too, Nathan, and that's all that matters." As they sat together under the stars, Nathan realized that this was the true wealth in life, not the money, not the status, but the connections they forged with others. Maria had taught him that, and for the first time in his life, he felt truly rich. In the end, it wasn't about inheritance or wealth. It was about the lessons learned, the growth experienced, and the bonds formed. For Nathan, the greatest gift he had received wasn't the fortune he had once taken for granted. It was the chance to become a better person and to be part of a family that valued kindness, empathy, and love above all else. As time went on, Maria became a permanent part of their lives, not just as someone who had inherited wealth, but as a cherished member of their family. She and Nathan's father worked together to honor her late father's legacy, investing in projects that supported underprivileged communities. Nathan, now an advocate for change, used his platform to raise awareness about social issues and challenge the stereotypes he had once so carelessly perpetuated. Though their journey had been difficult, it had led them to a place of understanding, respect, and most importantly, love. Together, they had forged a bond that transcended wealth, privilege, and hardship, creating a family bound by compassion and the desire to make the world a better place.